Good evening, I'm Jim Moray, attorney and chief correspondent for Inside Edition, sitting in for Jane tonight. We lead with a story that is nothing short of shocking and amazing. The return of Jaycee Dugard. 18 years ago, this beautiful 11-year-old girl was abducted on her way to a bus stop near her South Lake Tahoe, California home. Jaycee's stepfather watched helplessly as a man and a woman drove up, then snatched her. But yesterday afternoon, a woman claiming to be Jaycee appeared at a police station, reportedly with her captors, some 200 miles away. Listen.
Dugard was found alive in Antioch. Excuse me. She was found alive in Antioch. Just to remind you just a little bit, she was kidnapped in June of 1991. She was taken off the street in front of her house. As you all know, there was nothing then, nor is there anything now to indicate that this was anything other than a stranger abduction of an 11-year-old.
Amazing story. Fast-breaking developments in a case that was cold for almost 2 decades. Just hours ago, cops raided a home in the same county where Jaycee turned up. They arrested a 58-year-old sex offender and his wife. The man, Philip Garrido, was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, rape, lewd acts with a minor, and sexual penetration. His wife, Nancy, arrested on suspicion of conspiracy and kidnapping. Both of them are in jail, being held on $1 million bail. There's a lot to discuss. We'll be taking your calls, but first, straight to my panel. Ed Smart, father of Elizabeth Smart. She, too, was abducted and thankfully rescued. Darren Kavanoki, criminal defense attorney. Jennifer Hartstein, clinical psychologist. Tom Ruskin, former NYPD detective investigator and president of CMP Protective and Investigative Group. And Dan Simon, CNN correspondent, joining us live from outside that Antioch, California home raided earlier today. Dan, bring us up to date. What's the latest on those 2 suspects?
Well, first of all, Jim, you're right. I'm in Antioch, and I can tell you that authorities, including the FBI, are still inside the house going through all the evidence. We are told that a lot of that evidence in the backyard, that is apparently where the young woman, the victim in this case, had been living, where she was held captive along with her 2 children. Just a short time ago, the authorities in El Dorado County announced that the 2 young children in this case were in fact fathered by the suspect. Every new detail in this case is so chilling. So Jim, bottom line, we are told that 2 suspects in custody, Philip Garrido or Garrido, honestly I've heard the pronunciation both ways, and his wife Nancy Garrido or Garrido, charged with many things, including kidnapping, conspiracy. Mr. Garrido charged with sex with a minor, among many other charges. Again, authorities still at this house. We can tell you that this all came to light, recently when officers on the campus of UC Cal Berkeley saw Mr. Garrido acting suspiciously. Eventually his parole agent was brought into play, and this is where it gets really strange. The suspect in this case, Garrido, coming to that meeting with the parole agent, with the victim in this case, and her 2 children. Eventually it was determined that the 3 people with them were connected, the victim and the children. So obviously so strange, and still trying to get some more details, Jim.
Thank you, Dan. As Dan just mentioned minutes ago, the sheriff in El Dorado County held a news conference about Jaycee's return. Take a listen to more about this troubling story.
The 2 minor children turned out to be children of Jaycee and the male suspect Garrido. They, along with Nancy Garrido, were living together at the residence in Antioch since the original kidnapping. The search of the residence revealed a hidden backyard within a backyard. The hidden backyard had sheds, tents, and outbuildings where Jaycee and the girls spent most of their lives.
Ed Smart is joining us. He's Elizabeth Smart's father.
Yeah.
Ed, I'm sure that there are so many questions so many people have right now, but obviously the first thing that as a parent you feel has got to be relief. Give us some insight into what this family is going through right now.
Well, I think during this long period of time, this family has been living through the worst nightmare possible. I mean, to me, it's one of the worst things that could happen in life. And it's like your life comes to a standstill, stopped. And to have them reconnect again together, it's like the most euphoric feeling that you could ever have, and it's so wonderful. And I hope and pray that they, just have the time to get together and questions can be answered later on. Law enforcement doesn't need to find out every detail right now.
But Ed, this is now, we're hearing complicated by the fact that this young girl who was abducted apparently has 2 children now with her abductor. So that certainly makes this a tremendous nightmare for this family. Absolutely.
There's no question there are issues and problems to work through. But I think that the most important thing is that Jaycee knows that, you know, she doesn't have to live as she has been living in captivity, and that she has people that love her and do not judge her. Nobody knows what kind of a nightmare she has lived through, which, you know, the stranger it gets, the worse it sounds. But having compassion and understanding for her, and not trying to judge her, why didn't you do this or do that, why didn't you get away? You know, I think that those things are, you know, I've watched in the past where people have just tried to, you know, place blame, and it re-victimizes these people over and over and over again. And yes, the public may want to know, but, you know, the most important thing is that she has the support and the help and the love that she needs to get through this next time. I mean, I can't imagine what she's going through with 2 children and the difficulties of all of the issues there. But, you know, to know that it is over with, that she can move on with her life and do as she chooses rather than doing as her victimizer has chosen to do with her for these past 18 years, has got to be a huge relief.
Jennifer Hartstein, clinical psychologist. We heard Ed Smart talking about removing guilt from the equation with respect to the child, but if you're the stepfather and you witnessed the abduction, for years this poor man's been dealing with the guilt that he's had on not being able to save his daughter. So tell us about the family dynamic now.
It's got to be really tough. I mean, I think he's been living with this guilt. He hadn't been able to stop it. There was no news on where she was. So now the amount of relief, but there's still this going to be sense of guilt for him over time, because as he comes out what happened, as we learn more of the details, as he learns more of the details, he's going to have, you know, it's almost survivor's guilt. He stayed behind and couldn't help her, and then she went through this horrible thing. And I think we have to remember, she is the victim. Her children are the victims. And fear is a powerful emotion. It keeps you rooted where you are. And we don't know how much of that played, how fearful she was even to try and get out. And the story will unfold. We have to allow her to have that time to do that. And as she does, she can reforge these bonds with people she hasn't seen in 18 years. It's going to take that time.
As I mentioned, Jaycee's stepfather, Carl Probin, watched as his then 11-year-old stepdaughter was abducted back in 1991. Listen.
Watched the car go up the hill, and I saw my daughter making the curve up there. All of a sudden the car darted across the road, cut her off. I saw a door open. I jumped on my bike. I heard a scream. I pedaled, and I realized I couldn't catch him in time. So I came back down and called 911.
Jennifer, just quickly, we've got about 20 seconds till the break, but what is it like for somebody to witness this event? You talk about survivor's guilt, but that's got to linger and be so intense over these years.
It's got to, it just stays with you, and he has to have relived that moment over and over and over again, and the amount of relief he must have now is insurmountable.
Okay, much more on this incredible story in a bit. We're going to get to our 2 guests we haven't spoken to yet. We're also taking your calls. 1-877-JVM-SAYS. That's 1-877-586-7297. A graphic security tape showing a Florida couple's